Hi and welcome to the channel Built by Ben. In this week's episode we're going to be repairing a rotten window at a school. Now the school's told me that they're not on a big budget, so we've got to try and repair this window without sort of spending too much time or money on it. We're not going to be replacing any of the big components of the window, we're just going to be chopping bits of wood in and trying to make it look good, ready for the decorators. Thank you again for tuning in, it means a lot to me. Thanks to all the new subscribers, old subscribers. If you can carry on liking, commenting on the video, then obviously that really helps the channel. On my last video, which was repairing some pillars on the side of a door, I did put out a little thing on there to say if you dropped the price that you thought I charged in the comments, then whoever would get it right would get a little mention on this one. So well done to Shed Life and Doug Saunders. You both guessed £500, which was closest to my £505 invoice, so well done. We'll do the same again on this one. If you can guess what my invoice was for this little window repair, then you'll get a mention on the following video after that. So drop something in the comments if you like a bit of that. And the last little thing before we jump into the job is I've started up a new membership feature on this channel. So if you want to jump over to my page, have a look on the memberships. There's loads of different tiers that you can choose if you just want to support the channel and help me grow a little bit, or if you want full-on DIY advice for a big project you've got coming up, then let me know. There'll be features with the Pro DIY membership that you can see on there, where you can give me a video call at any time and I can give you a help out if if you've got any problems around the house. So we'll jump straight into the footage then. Hope you enjoy this week and I'll see you again for the next one. Cheers. Right, so you can see here, it's probably the worst rotten window I've seen, or at least in a long time. So I got tasked with this one. First thing that I ended up doing was just to take the sill off. We want to take the sill off flush with the front of the casements. So I've just sped up the multi-tool in a bit so that you can see what's going on, but I won't bore you with a full process because it took hours. And we're just making it flush with the front of the casement so that we can add a new sill nosing onto the window, just to give it that sort of weatherproofing that it needs. So we're just taking off bit by bit, trying to hack away at it, but not too harsh because a lot of it was really rotten. If I was doing this for a customer that wasn't a school, I'd probably say that the bottom three casements need to be replaced as well, but as explained in the beginning of the video, we didn't want to go too crazy with the cost because of the budget that they were on. So with the mullions here, we're just going at a 45-degree angle so that any wood that we chop in has still got a sort of way of getting the water away from it. If the decoration sort of fails in the next couple of years, then obviously the timber will be exposed, or the new timber that I'm now about to put in. So it's important that you do it at 45 degrees so that any water that does get into those joins manages to find its way out as well. So we're just taking, there was like on the side of the mullions, and the mullions is the vertical part of the window frame there. There was like a small beading as well, so I've also cut them at 45 and we'll replace them at the same time, just to give it the best job that it can have, really. So it's really important that we don't bang away at this thing. The extensive rot that was at the bottom of this frame just meant that the whole thing was just really weak, and any excessive sort of banging at the frame could have dislodged some of the other parts, and you obviously don't want to do that, because as soon as you start dislodging too much, we're going to end up with more to replace. So it's a closer view of what we did with the mullions here. Again, just taking it really easy, going in at a 45-degree angle. Doesn't matter if it's bang on 45 because obviously we're cutting the wood. You see quite a lot of smoke coming from the multi-tool blades here. But reason being is because I just bought some really cheap, horrible multi-tool blades off of Amazon, knowing that they were going to get smashed to pieces doing this window. With that massive concrete sill under the sill nosing now, I knew that I'd hit that a few times with the blade. So we don't want to be going in there with expensive blades and blunting a load of sort of 20-30 quid blades in the meantime. So yeah, we're just going with a really cheap blade. Did use about 4 or 5 of them, but again, 4 or 5 of these blades is probably about 20 quid, so you ain't got to worry too much. Same rule applies with the chisel you use, obviously. I was using my wrecking chisel for this, just taking out all of the bottom of the casement there as well, trying my hardest not to go all the way through to the inside. It was up to the decorators on this job to put the window mate on this, or called different things really. A lot of people call it repair care, but it's basically like an epoxy resin type stuff to repair bits that you don't want to replace. So the task for me was just to do all of the carpentry side of things and then leave the decorators up to the epoxy filling before it was decorated. So what we do here is just we get it back to a nice sort of clean surface, ready for the epoxy stuff, because that won't stick to loose wood. And you see here we're just going in with a Dremel just to sand it and give it as nice a surface as possible for that epoxy stuff to stick. It's always good practice to do this anyway, just to get rid of all of the rotten wood. Don't really want to leave any of it in there. And then the final thing to do is just to give it all a hoover up and get rid of all of the really loose stuff. And then get it ready for chopping some new wood in. So we just give the nosing sort of a little bit of a measure up here. We get the height of it. And we also get the length. The projection didn't matter too much as long as it sort of come over the concrete bevel, just to get rid of the water. And we just cut the sill to length here. And then what you can see me doing here is just planing a slight drop onto the front of the nosing and giving it a sand over with the orbital sander. You can see an end on view here. Just give it a slight degree so the water can run off of it. And then we go through from the front to the back of the sill with a forcing a bit first, just so that we've got a nice disappearing head on the screw. That can also be filled with the epoxy resin after it's all been screwed and fixed. And then we just go on top of that concrete sill there with a bit of Stixel. And we also go up against the frame so that we can push the sill back onto that frame and make sure we get a nice connection before we screw it. It's always good to stick and to screw these types of things, just so that you've got a sort of double barrier of things lasting. If I just screwed that, then if the screws ever rust through in the future, then the sill nosing would probably just come off. And that is a 120mm timber screw that we just went through. I lost a bit of footage there actually because the phone stopped recording, but we just squeezed the sill on and screwed it all the way through to the frame. Those screws did actually manage to grab something half decent. So then what we do is we just measure out the mullion and we just cut bits to tap in to try and replicate it, and we just mark up the sort of shape of it there, tap it back out, and then we just have a look and see what sort of shape that we've got to create. We take it over to the workstation. There's a few different ways of trying to get that shape. I was just joining up the lines here, and then what you can see me doing is just taking the front part of the meat off where we didn't need it at all. I always use a scrap bit of wood just to hold that there when I'm doing a bit of a dodgy cut like that, just in case the wood flicks up. You don't want your fingers getting chucked into the saw blade. And then I took it over to the planer and just give it a couple of runs, and you can just sort of tell by your pencil marks on the front there when you're getting close. This is my way of doing it. I'm sure there's other ways. If you're in a workshop, then you can do it a lot more accurately, but this is just site carpentry really. You just got to improvise and try and get the best finish that you can. And you can see there's a fairly decent shaped bit of wood there. And then we just try a dry fit here just to make sure everything matches up nicely. In this case it went really good. As you can see there, it's a good match for what was existing. It sits on the sill nicely. So that one's ready for gluing up and fixing with the same screws. And basically what we do is just repeat that process for the other mullions, including the end one there. And then we just get those screwed in. Same again. I think I actually used some 80mm screws to go through that. It might have been 100. But you just select your screw for the best of the job really. And then you can see me here just planing up again. I've used a bit of double-sided tape and stuck it to a bit of 4x2 so that your bit of wood doesn't shift. You don't have to hold it with your fingers at all. You just want your fingers completely out of the way of the blades. And try and shape it as best as possible. And we just finish it off with the orbital sander here before we go and try it in on the window. And again we just dry fit it, make sure that it fits in there nicely. So you can see here we've completed the sort of main timbers that we need to cut in. You may notice it all looks a little bit sort of tatty at the moment, but once the decorators have finished with the epoxy resin and all of the caulking and bits, it looks really good when it's finished. So here what I'm trying to do, the epoxy resin stuff's quite expensive, so I'm just trying to chop in some bits of timber on the really deep parts. And again, there's probably better ways of cutting that bit of wood, but I was just improvising on site, just to try and get the job done quickly and effectively. I did use the jigsaw as well, just to take some of the meatier parts of that off, but we just created this sort of odd shaped part there just to stick and pin into place. Believe it or not, that probably saves about a tube of the epoxy stuff, so you're talking about 40 to 50 quid saved just by spending 5 minutes chopping a bit of wood about. And then you can see here, did the same on the other casement. Just getting that to sit in there nicely, and then checking the front face with a chisel to make sure that everything all fill in level. Then we just fix that one in place, and that is the carpentry aspect of it done. Now we did have a tube of the epoxy resin on the van anyway, so my mate Brownie here is just mixing a bit up for us, and this was just to sort of show you what happens after it's epoxied. You can see there you sort of fill in the smaller bits that aren't worth chopping bits of wood in for. We didn't do the middle of the casements there because we ran out of stuff, so we just did the most tricky bits just to give the decorators a bit of an easier ride when they start epoxying themselves. But yeah, that's how to repair a very rotten window, and I hope you enjoyed the footage, and we'll see you again on the next episode.